Hello everyone, this is Matthew, and today we're going to introduce you to what DevOps is. We're going to cover a few key elements. We're going to take you through how DevOps came into being, what DevOps is. You'll also look at the stages and the tools that are used to implement DevOps and DevOps practices within your organization. I'll take a look at and introduce what Etsy is doing with DevOps and how it transformed how they were able to be successful. And finally, we'll tie everything up by going through the benefits of what DevOps is. So let's jump into the first stage here of how DevOps came into being. To do this, I'm going to tell a little bit of a story, and we're going to use this story to help explain how different types of delivery models are used to implement different ways of pushing software and services into the world. And there are three main types: there's waterfall, agile, and then we'll get into DevOps. So here we have Max, and Max is actually studying at school. And the story that we're going to tell here is how Max learned different ways of being able to delight her customer. Now, the first way that Max learned how to delight her customer, so what Max is looking to do is to complete her assignment at the end of the year. And she's doing this because her instructor has given her a final exam and she has to be successful in that final exam. So what is her exam? So she has to be able to produce 200 dresses that meet and delight her customer. Now, the first approach Max is going to take is she's going to take the waterfall model. And the waterfall model approach is one where we have different groups of people separated from each other. So we have Max, who is a designer, who's going to design the outfit. And then Max is then going to give that outfit to a tailor. And then the tailor is then going to create 200 dresses, at the end of which it's going to be handed over to the teacher. But here's the problem with the waterfall model is that you have a cascading delivery approach where one group hands off to a next group that hands off to a next group. But finally, when the item is given to the group that actually wants the product, in this case the teacher, what we find out is that because we haven't worked with the teacher, all of the work that we've been doing has been wrong. And this is one of the reasons why that you see such significant failure rates within IT, is that we are delivering solutions and taking so much time, but we're not getting impact from the people who are providing us the guidance. So this is waterfall model. So let's kind of look at some of these elements. So how waterfalls came into being is that we have key elements such as requirements that are given by a group, in this case the teacher, but it could be a business team that you're working with. We have the designer, who could be the developers and the engineers creating work. And then we have people who are then scaling the work that we're doing at high levels. This is seen as the implementation team, but this could also be your software factory team that's working offshore. And then finally, you want to get back and get verification from the people who provided you the requirements in the first place that you've delivered what they needed. And after all this, we go into a maintenance phase. So, as there are changes that happen, we have to do maintenance. So let's look at the next stage here, which is Agile. And the difference between Agile and Waterfall is that you can kind of almost see that instead of taking 3 months to do a delivery, with Agile, we're taking 2 weeks to do delivery. There are what's called sprints in Agile, which are bi-weekly cadence of delivering. Now, some companies have sprints that are only 1 week long, some have 4 weeks long. Typically, you have 2 weeks. So in this instance, the designer creates a dress, hands it to the tailor, and then instead of the tailor then creating 200 dresses, he just creates one and hands it to the teacher for review. Well, you know what? The teacher then can give immediate feedback, and then we go through the process again for another 2 weeks, and we get to the end of that 2 weeks. And you know what? In this instance, we've now created the dress that the teacher wants from the requirements that have been handed out. What's awesome about this is instead of taking 3 months to create an additional 199 dresses, we've only created one dress that was not correct, and then the rest of the dresses are now created correctly, and we can start accelerating our delivery cycles. But there's a problem. We're missing out a critical element in this model, and that person is the customer. And the customer experience is what's driving DevOps, because the teacher or the person with the requirements may believe that they know what the customer wants, but until the customer actually tries on the product, they're not going to have that real world feedback. And so in this instance, we've created a product that just doesn't fit the customer, and something has to be done about that. So this is where we start looking at ways in which DevOps can be optimized to the customer. So here is the approach that we have for Agile. We have the requirements, we have the designer. These don't change. We have the development team and who are creating the product. But here is the key element that does change. We have testing and feedback. And we have these as continuous loops that take the information that we got initially as our requirements document, and we test those with our customers actually out in the field. And this becomes a continuous loop that is providing data back into our team, and we're using data and testing to validate the product moving forward. So the goal for DevOps is to have disparate teams working together. So you need to break down those silos you have within your organizations and have the teams connected. And when they do, they're able to improve upon each other's skills. So when we get feedback from the customer that a shirt may fit too loosely, we can then incorporate that feedback right back into our delivery loop until we're able to, with just a few stitches, adjust that shirt in real time. And you're seeing this today with a lot of large websites such as Google, Office 365, and then later we'll step in and show Etsy, where those sites and those applications, those web applications, are being updated in almost real time. And this is the DevOps approach. So the development team is there for creating the product, but they're there in alignment with the operations team who's responsible for deploying the product. And the two, instead of being disparate teams working away from each other, are closely connected. And the key to this is that testing element. And we'll talk a little bit more about how these DevOps teams using testing and automation are able to increase and improve the efficiency of the product that's released. So DevOps is a software engineering culture, and history is from the world of development operations, instead of them being separated, pulling the two together. So let's talk a little bit about the stages and tools that are within DevOps. You'll see at the center of our diagram here that integration is key for all the work we do. So typically with development, you have planning, coding, building, and then testing. And then within operations, you have deployment, operations, and monitoring. With DevOps, is how can we provide the tools that allow these two worlds to coexist with each other. So if we're looking at planning and coding, we want to be using the tools that allow us to be able to manage our work that needs to be done and going through a pipeline process and code versioning. We want to be able to have the tools that to automatically collect the code that's been created and automatically build those applications. And you'll see that the term automatic is something that is consistent with DevOps. Testing also becomes automated. So everything that gets created, every time code is checked into your Git repository, you want to be able to test that code. And you're doing the testing, so instead of getting to the end of a project and having a phase such as regression testing, where you're trying to find all of the things that are not working, by having continuous testing on every single aspect of every piece of code that you write, you're able to create a library of code that has a complete and complementary library of testing. So it doesn't matter if you enter in a new code block, that code block will be tested against all the other existing test cases that you have. And then you're looking at the tools, and we have here a couple examples of Puppet and Chef, which are deployment tools that when you push out your code, instead of having maybe the different versions of code delivery you have, where your build environment, stage, and deployment environment may be different because it's difficult to have those aligned. These tools in a DevOps environment are ensuring that each of those environments are completely identical, and that when you push out the code to the production environment, that you're creating identical environments for the rest of the development and coding to be created in. And there isn't the issue of, well, this runs on my computer but not on your computer. Everything is consistent. And then the final stage is monitoring. And this is really critical. You want to be able to monitor the complete performance of all the work that you're doing, really every single aspect, because there are so many variances on the way in which your consumers can connect with you, from mobile devices, from desktop devices, and now the emerging technologies such as voice and augmented reality. We're seeing just a huge number of ways in which consumers can connect with the digital message that you're sending. And then the heart of DevOps is integration for all of these tools. And we've provided example tools through these slides here, but there is a much bigger and deeper collection of tools that you can also work with. But these are some of the most popular ones. So let's talk a little bit about the implementation of DevOps. So the previous slide, we talked about integration, particularly with Jenkins being the center of the universe for everything you're doing. And what you'll see as we go through the next couple of slides is that it doesn't matter what you're doing as you move through the different implementation stages of DevOps. What you'll find is every steps through that integration point. So what that means is that instead of having a clear different gates that you may be building and deploying your solutions on, what you're actually doing is building and coding, deploying, testing, and monitoring simultaneously all the time, and using your integration point as a way to be able to control how the code is being delivered. So you can be fetching and building code. Integration points are the way in which you do that. You can be testing your code. You can be doing automatic deployments if all the right tests are approved and the work that's being done within your deployment tools has been approved, then you automatically deploy. You're able to then monitor and get information back into your integration point, which then sends back the work that needs to be done in the planning stages and creating your backlog, and then the next round of code that has to be created. And it becomes this virtuous cycle that feeds itself. So within DevOps, we're looking at a number of key things. We want to automate and have continuous integration. It's not an event that happens within your program. It is something that is continuously executed on. The same thing then is for delivery. Delivery doesn't become an event. What you're doing with DevOps is you're continuously delivering, and that delivery is dependent on the code you write meeting the test you've written for your integration. So everything that is being tested, as soon as it passes that test, you deploy out to your production environment. So how do you manage the deployment? Before we have worked in very large programs that took a significant amount of communication and effort to deploy. With DevOps, we go in the completely opposite direction. We're looking at creating lots and lots of small implementations. I'll give you an example. On any given day, Office 365, and we all use Office 365 on a daily basis, goes through hundreds of small independent updates that are built on microservices. The other advantage you have when you start building elements that are microservices is that you can connect to those microservices to build out additional features and functionality at a faster rate later. A good example of this is the way in which Amazon built out and scaled up their AWS environment from a few number of services in 2008 to thousands of services today. They're able to do that because they have implemented microservices as a way to scale up rapidly. Monitoring and logging all aspects of the application. You want to become obsessive about the performance of your solution. And don't look at the performance of your solution through a single lens. Keep the direction that you're working on as a way to be able to delight your customer. So that means building out a website that works and is optimized for mobile, but also ensuring that that website works for desktop. There's still a lot of people building out websites just for desktop. 80% of your traffic is going to be mobile traffic today. Also, bear in mind that the APIs into those applications have to be monitored, and that the people connecting to your content will be doing it through multiple different networks. Some of those people will be sitting at home at their desktop and they'll have a high-speed internet connection. Other people will be walking down the street and using their phone, and they will have a slower wireless interconnection. Another key point that's different with DevOps with traditional environments is that you want to look at your core infrastructure as code. What that means is that you want to look at the environment that you're creating your solution for. So 5 years ago, if you were building out a solution, you would have physical hardware and you would install Windows onto those servers or Linux onto those servers, and you'd have to build out a series of programs that would run on those servers. The next evolution was virtualization, and that has continued to evolve until where we are today is containers. And containers are a way in which you can actually script out using technologies like Kubernetes to be able to create the operations infrastructure in just code and execute it against code. The advantage that you have by doing that is that you can write in code what the environment should look like, what are all the pieces of software, and what is the version. And then if something changes where you need to be able to test that and have your developers working in that same environment, you can actually just give them the code for the container of what that would look like, and they can immediately have the same exact environment running so they can be testing, and there is no doubt then that the code that they are creating will work exactly the same in the production environment as it is within their development environment. And then communication becomes just an incredible tool when you're working with DevOps, because you're looking at doing multiple releases continuously throughout the day and pushing those releases to all of your customers to help continue delighting your customers. And what you can see with the communication pipeline is you want to take advantage of tools such as Slack or Microsoft Teams, where you're able to take all the different tools that we've been talking about, such as Jenkins, such as Git, such as Chef, and have those tools talk to your communication tools, which is the tools that your team uses to share information, and broadcast to those teams when successful updates have been pushed out. And the team as a whole knows in real time all of the changes that are happening. So let's use an example here of Etsy and where they were able to be successful. So Etsy is a very successful e-commerce site, and if you are into crafting, then you probably have already used Etsy. You may have even sold features on Etsy. But the challenge that Etsy had is that when they were working in an agile point of view, they were running into problems for when they were getting ready to release products into the real world. It would take them up to 4 hours to update the Etsy website. And when you're updating the website twice a week and you're down for 4 hours each time, each of those seconds that you're down, you are losing people to another website and you're losing revenue. And this just really kind of drove down the number of potential customers that could be buying from Etsy. And so what they realized is that the updates had to happen both faster to meet the constant changes and needs of the consumer, but then the website itself could not come down. And to do this, Etsy created a tool called the Deployinator. And I just love that name. So the Deployinator is the tool that is used to continuously deploy code from Etsy. And what's great about the Deployinator is that it's open source. You can actually go ahead and download and see the tool that Etsy is actually using. The tool allowed it for the automation of deployment, and what that led to was just this continuous release of updates. And Etsy today has over 50 updates every single day. I mean, think about that. Etsy is updating their website every 26 minutes. So what are the benefits of going through DevOps versus Agile and Waterfall? The first, and I think really the biggest benefit, is that you are constantly testing and delivering on technology in a continuous pattern. You are not waiting for somebody to approve a release and then having a release happen. You're using the testing and the analytics to be able to validate that what you've created will work. The second is that you're breaking everything down into the smallest, tiniest chunk to be able to validate that chunk will work in that environment. And then you're looking at automating the whole of this environment, and that automation helps you reinforce and validate security, and it also allows you to provide a self-audit track to be able to validate the changes that you've made. So hopefully you've learned something from this video. Here are some key takeaways that I'd like you to have. The first one is that waterfall, agile, and DevOps are really ways in which delivery has matured within IT organization and businesses as a whole. But DevOps is a way to be able to maximize the way to continuously delight your customer. DevOps is that wonderful space where both development and operations come together, and the way that it comes together is through the use of tools. And tools are central for all the work you're doing, particularly integration tools, and being able to automate and test all of the code that you're working through. There are some best practices that help you define how your DevOps team will work and execute. And finally, we use Etsy as an example of, instead of having their website down for 4 hours at a time for when they would make an update and having to do that twice a week, now the website is not down at all. So they gained an additional 4 hours every updates in e-commerce. And on top of that, Etsy is now releasing over 50 updates every single day. So I want to thank you, and hopefully you've learned something from this class. If you want to learn more, click like for the subscribe for this YouTube channel, and also join us at Simplilearn.com.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.